advice. Always get it right. Ask the Planman. Finance, insurance, and more.
Hello, welcome back to Ask the Planman. Everything you wanted to know about finance, insurance, and more. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein. Today, you've all heard about the Property Brothers. Well, today I'm sitting down with the Esposito Brothers. No, not Tony and Phil, for all you hockey fans out there, but Jeff and Nick, who I do understand are indeed cousins of Tony and Phil. Jeff is a realtor and successful house flipper for the past 15 years, while Nick has been a successful mortgage broker himself for the past 20. Today, they're here to talk with us about the current state of real estate and how you too can partake in the world of renovating and flipping houses. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me ask you real quick. How did you guys get started in flipping houses?
Nick, you want to go or want me to go?
You can go first.
I started, Bruce. Well, by the way, thank you, Bruce, for having us today. Should be fun. I started back in about 2002 or 3, just taking advantage of the 2-year hold for 2 out of the last 5 years or previous 5 years, and banking it tax-free, flipping my own properties. Just caught the market right, and then got licensed because I was doing enough of them. I got licensed, real estate license in 2007. So just started by flipping my own home, a couple of them. And
so you jumped on something I had down for one of my further questions. So there is a tax advantage that you were aware of literally 20 years ago. So let's just put that out there because I was going to bring it up later. If you're renovating your own home and you live in it for 2 continuous years, there was a special tax treatment, which I think then might have still been unlimited, but now it's a $500,000 capital gain cap freebie, right? So if you make $400,000, you can flip your house every 2 years, never pay the capital gains. If you made $1 million, you're paying tax on half of it.
Right. Now that 500 is if you're married.
If you're married, 250 per person.
Right. So I was married at the time. I don't know if the limit was 500.
You're still
Yes.
married.
Yes.
You're
So
still married.
When I started, yeah. But when we started back in 03, 04, or whatever, yeah, we were married and still are. And I don't know if the amount was the same. I don't know if it was 250 and 500. I forget.
Yeah, well, they're definitely
For a long time.
It's been the same.
There was a long time where there was no cap. Jeff started basically renovating and flipping his own houses, living in them. And then a couple years later, based upon the success you were having, got your license and became a realtor, which is ultimately how you and I met, was on the realty space. And so, Nick, how about you? How did you get started in the space on the mortgage side?
I got started in mortgage right around 2000, 2001. I jumped in on the real estate side with Jeff probably after his first 2 or 3 flips of his primary, and I saw him doing well. Then he went and got that real estate license, and then we started doing them for spec, where we'd buy less expensive homes than ones we'd live in, but we're in the 175 to 300 range. Then we'd renovate, and we were making decent money. We were doing them every, I don't know, at the time, 2 a year, maybe
about that.
Okay. Now, I think a multitude of questions I had leading into this makes me think about how does somebody assess the potential profitability? You've obviously got a keen eye on identifying a property, the market, but how do you know if I put in this amount of money, I can still make X, and that's a good ROI, return on investment for me? How do you go about determining that? Where'd you get that from?
You want to go, or I'll go, Nick, whatever.
You can go because that's more of what you handled.
Yeah, I would look, it depends what the property was. Unfortunately, when you're doing $150,000 to $300,000 houses, they tend to be in pretty, ubiquitous. I don't know if that's even the right term.
Needs help.
Right. In what?
Disrepair.
Well, no, but I'm saying the comps are the comps. It's different. Like right now, my primaries, I've been doing, more custom properties where there's more leeway. And when I say leeway, there's not a comp that's the exact floor plan, that's the same square footage, it's on the same size lot. You got what you got. It's pretty much one of a kind. But when we were doing our flips, it was older homes, mostly in Tempe or Chandler, Arizona. And there were comps right down the street that were the same thing. So going in, if you didn't buy it right, I mean, that you make your money, I believe, on the buy more than on the sell. So I would look at, hey, what's like the nicest property that's sold in the last 6 months here? I'm going to factor in a little bit of appreciation. I don't know, maybe a couple 5% for the year, 7% for the year, figuring it's going to take me at least 3-4 months to do this. So compare that to the most expensive property that's sold and the nicest property, and I figured I would be nicer than that and more time will have passed. So I just have to guess, really. Buy it for 175 and there's a 2.25 comp. Maybe I could sell mine for 240 by the time the time comes. I was just trying to be careful how much I spent.
Right. And I think that's the key is people lose track of that so-called budget and they don't plan out properly. We are the Plan Man show. So planning, you have to go into this not just with an open wallet or checkbook and say, I'll spend whatever and I want that nice gold faucet. But you have to have a design and a budget to make sure at least you're not losing money. Nobody's doing this to lose money.
I think if you're doing it to make money, you also need, like, I never could have done something like this on my own because I don't have the eye. Like, I can't look at a kitchen and say, okay, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and that's going to cost X. Because you can't I don't think you can hire a general contractor to come in and run it and then him hire all the subs. I don't think you'll make money that way. I think a lot of the reason we were making money is Jeff was basically our general.
Right.
Yeah, and you deal with the same subs. I mean, I would use the same tile guy, same drywall guy, same painter, same stucco guy. And if it got to be more difficult, you get a licensed electrician, plumber, whatever we needed. But yeah, to hire a general and have him mark everything up probably would have not made any money.
Sure. It just eats away at your profit. Sure. I mean, time is money, so it's your time instead of their time. And I'm sure as the years went by, your knowledge and expertise increased accordingly, where you became the master of it. And, and that leads to my next question is, what were the early challenges that you faced back then, Jeff? And how would you caution somebody listening today?
We say early, if I go back early.
When you first started, if you could recall maybe some early mistakes that you had or just challenges you faced. Let me throw out a couple. So you mentioned the early 2000s, so interest rates were higher. We were coming off of the dot-com crash, so the stock market was dropping. We eventually got into a little bit of a real estate bubble from 05 to 07, right? You and I met in right around 2009, 2010. And by then, the market had pretty much fell apart. Right. So within your first few years, you had some juicy good years to really bad years. And when you and I met, we were in the throes of some of those, I don't want to say you were stuck, but you were stuck with a couple of things, which became a financial strain. Right.
Yeah. Well, in the earlier years, though, I was doing just my primary, so it was never a problem. But the timing, couldn't have been worse on one of my primaries. I bought in 07. But to go back to the more business of it, let's say with Nick, when we were involved, we would put like 20% down. Nick would do our loan. They were shorter term. Sometimes they were 5-6 months roughly, and we would just pay it off and get rid of it. But the properties I was buying back then and I would find on the MLS. I never really. One time I bought a property from a company that goes to the courthouse steps and bids for you. Or they buy a small amount of inventory themselves and you can buy their inventory. I did buy one of those, didn't do that well on it, but it was just a bad property. It was a 0 lot line, a little bit different. We didn't do that well, but we did well. I think you're asking me when we didn't do well, but I think we did well with the market itself when the short sale stuff was going on, like 09, 10, right around when I met you, Bruce. Because short sales were pretty easy to pick up. There was a bunch of them out there. And for me, I needed 1 or 2 steals a year is all it was. And those were out there. Now that doesn't exist, and I think people would probably overpay. I'd be a little scared. But, it was nice to do it that way because you got a full 10-day inspection period. You were in a regular real estate contract. You were not in a courthouse steps. If somebody dumped concrete down the toilet, you were stuck with it, So, but we didn't get burned, I don't think at all, except on my primary.
So Nick brought up a point where he got licensed and was writing the loans, and you said earlier you eventually got licensed where you could be your own broker. So let's talk about the benefits there of getting your licenses in the space. The fact that as a family duo here, that you are able to add to your margins, let's call it, because you were able to get a commission or at least save some of the commission on the selling side. When it was time to sell your own property, you're not going to take a commission out for yourself. But when you buy the properties from somebody, that seller has to pay you a commission. So you're already getting into a positive. And then if Nick's going to write the loans, Nick's getting either really great terms and not taking much of a commission, or whatever's built in, baked into it, he's going to get something as well. So for the audience, there's some added benefit here to adding to your margins by getting licensed in this space. Would you guys agree with that?
Huge help.
100%, especially in the early years, because I don't know if people are familiar with how the lending side worked, but up until Dodd-Frank in, I guess that was 2009, 2010, I could price a loan wherever I wanted to, depending on how much I want to make. So if it was for us, I could make it, I could price it where we made zero. Dodd-Frank came along and changed all that, where I now have a contract with the bank where they pay me X% of the loan amount.
Which is also good from protecting people from the gouging, where
Correct.
They're getting 4 or 5 points put in.
They're protecting the consumer.
Sure. So any other challenges? Nick, what kind of challenges do you think you faced early on in your career from the mortgage side?
Well, I lived through the good times up through like 05, 06, when everything was selling and I was doing tons of loans, right up to where like when the market started to crumble, especially Phoenix, because I think we get the highest highs and lowest lows here. Our market is so volatile in Phoenix and Scottsdale. So then I then had to live through the 07, 08, 09 years when there was absolutely nothing going on.
Right. So for a real estate flipper / investor, and again, we touched on briefly earlier that there are people who are now big on the Airbnb space, that investing in real estate's become more than just a home or a flip, but now people are acquiring properties for passive income and moving into the space of the Airbnb world, right? And so from a lender standpoint, do you want that kind of business? Is that helping the business? Are people cash buyers? How are you seeing the influence of the Airbnb side to all of this?
I believe a lot of those people are cash buyers. And no, from a lending standpoint, pricing when you're lending is risk-based. That's why people always get the best rates on their primary residence. Same thing on a second home. When you get to the investment properties and Airbnb type spaces, you're going to get the worst rates because the people are not emotionally or financially tied to that property. So as soon as anything happens in the market where that thing's not cash flowing, that guy can walk away and he still has a place to live.
And tied in from the insurance side, we offer clients auto and homeowners. So the homeowner insurance market looks at a rental property versus what's considered owner occupied. So if Jeff's living in the home while he's renovating it, it's still his home. He's going to pay a lower home insurance rate than if he had 6 properties he's renovating and flipping as an investor or an Airbnb type person. So those rates are going to vary as well. So your lending rates are going to change and your insurance rates are going to change based upon what we call owner occupancy. That's great.
Yep.
One of the things that I do think is going to be a game changer, though, that's making this space in the world become much easier, that right now Fannie Mae, Freddie, and also FHA offer renovation loans, where I could go in and buy one of these foreclosures or short sales that's in complete disrepair and tell the lender, okay, look, I'm paying $300. Here are my bids from my contractor. I'm putting another $100 in. And guess what? They lend you the whole $400 based on the future value of that home.
That goes on today.
That goes on right now. The title company will sit on, they'll pay out off that $300 to the seller. Then that additional $100 that the renovation was costing sits with the title company and they issue the draws to the contractor.
So the contractor will provide receipts. We bought $3,000 worth of tile. We bought $2,000 worth of cabinetry. And as they put the work in, they'll get reimbursed.
Correct. You get like 3 or 4 draws throughout the entire process. You can't do it for every purchase. It's similar to when you're building a home with a construction loan.
Is that fairly new? Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, Nick, are there rules on what contractors you can use? Do they have to be licensed or?
You have to have a licensed general. There's no owner contractor option, even if you are licensed. So yeah, they're watching watching themselves with some of those rules, but yes, there are restrictions.
So it's some independent oversight versus you dip it in your own pocket.
Correct.
Right. They need a third party.
They're very strict about prior to doing the loan as part of the underwriting process. They've got a whole spreadsheet that you need to fill out. Here's the general. Here's the sub for electrical. Here's the sub for the pool. Here's the sub for this. And you need all those bids in writing to be submitted for the underwriter.
Planned out. We're back to the plan, man. There you go. Got to tie it in somehow. Any other challenges you see people today? A lot have shifted. Markets have shifted a little bit. We're seeing stock market changes. The show's not supposed to be dating into a timeline, but we've had rise in interest rates in the last few months. We've started to see some slowdowns here and there. We've got escalating inflation prices and gas and oil prices. So what are you guys seeing? Nick, you can go first as far as the challenges right now with the rise in interest rates, and how does it trickle down into the flipping side, the B&B side, the just general ownership?
Well, obviously the rise in rates is going to make the Airbnb situation change slightly because you're carrying a higher monthly payment, so to create cash flow. But I don't think it's changed enough to the point that will stop those people. It hasn't gone up enough. The people that the rates are hurting are the guys they're buying the $300,000-$400,000 starter house, the kid buying his first home. He's the one that when it went from 3 to 6, now all of a sudden doesn't qualify. Doesn't really affect the $1 million guy. It's hurting the little guy.
Jeff, what do you think?
It's interesting. I mean, with the last, let's say 45 days, I'll use, maybe even 60 days with the change in the market. If you're a flipper 60 days ago, I would say probably don't touch anything. It's scary. You're probably going to
don't touch anything. I'm sorry. Just step back a little bit and reassess. Go ahead.
That's what I would have said, 60 days ago, because you can't, I hate to use the word steal, but there's no good buys out there. Everybody's overpaying. They're paying more than asking price. They're waiving appraisals. You can't compete with that as an investor. So unless you have some inside track to get property, I don't see you going through a realtor traditional MLS way to get a home. That's starting to change. I don't know that prices are really plummeting yet, but you look at neighborhoods that had one house for sale. Now they have 6, 7 houses. There's more variety. There's more options. Lender on Nick's end of it, though, it's a little harder to buy. But I don't know if those deals are back yet. I'd still be super cautious. And on the VRBO side, I mean, Phoenix is a pretty good market for that because I'm going to say maybe 70% is newer HOA controlled properties, probably like Florida. But there is a nice chunk of Scottsdale, Phoenix that is older homes, no HOA, and you can do VRBO. So when you get an investor really looking to buy, a VRBO property, you got to know what to look for and what neighborhoods you can even handle it, or you're wasting your time. You can't look at these 2005 subdivisions that were built 10 years ago. They're not going to allow short-term rental. So that's the big hurdle for that guy. The guy like me, I'm just still staying away. I don't there's not enough deals yet to be had.
So you brought up a couple good points, and something Nick said a moment ago about the market shifting, but not necessarily being too impacted yet. The Wall Street world, we say you don't want to catch a falling knife. Mm-hmm. So as Jeff is saying, if it's him right now, he's stepping back. He feels that knife is falling. Not that I'm putting words in your mouth, and he's not ready to go grab the knife yet. He thinks it might fall a little bit further. Maybe I wait till it bounces off the floor. Maybe it stops bouncing altogether, and eventually I'll pick it up and I'll be more comfortable there. So you as an investor listening here, you've got to make your own financial decisions. You got to look at your cash flow. You got to look at your investment opportunity. But we may, the other piece you mentioned, Jeff brought up, was where there was one, now there's 6, meaning listings in the neighborhood. And so everything I've heard for the last 6, 12, 18, 24 months, when we've spoken throughout the hot Arizona market, the hot Florida market, the COVID demand has created an amazing volcanic eruption of real estate prices. And as I have been polling people in the real estate space for the last 6 or 9 months before the rates went up, rates were still 3%, right? And I'm asking them, how are you seeing? What's going on? When does it stop? Because I've been doing this a long time. You guys are doing this a long time. This has not been a normal run. This has been an abnormal run. And most, if not always, markets return to a more normalized rate of return. So if the stock market has an annualized rate of return over 100 years of 10%, it's going to revert back to the mean. You can't make 50% 10 years in a row. It's just not going to happen. You can make 50% this year. You might lose 20% next year. And all of a sudden your average is down to 15 for the two. You have to get more normalized. So I think what you've shared, when one listing goes to 6, I'll get to a point eventually here, I hope. When you go from 1 to 6, is you're starting to see the demand side soften. Not soften may not even be the right word. The red hot flame is becoming a hot flame. It may be not as... And so to Nick's point earlier, the pain in the interest rates hasn't been reached yet to maybe cause more of that knee jerk, where now all of a sudden there's 30 houses, there's no buyers. Some of the realtors I spoke with down here are like, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, I would have 50 people in the first open house and I'd have 30 offers. And now I got 5 people at the open house and no offers. Like, that's how fast it shifted.
That's what's happening here.
Here's what nobody's taking into account, though. And I see this quite often because, as I was explaining earlier, I deal with a lot of people on the credit side of the business. So I'm getting referrals from loan officers nationwide for me to help their clients with credit. And I have so many people over the last 6, 8 months that were saying, now I got my credit fixed, but there's nothing to buy. I'm just signing another lease. How many of those people are still hiding in the weeds that now that the market becomes more normal are going to jump back in and say, okay, maybe now I can get a house? So there's this whole group of buyers that completely left the game.
Sure. Well, so from the lending side, give us a sense, Nick, of that ratio. If rates just went, and we'll just use round numbers, literally went from 3% to 6% on a 30-year mortgage, that buying power has to constrict, right? If you're pre-qualifying somebody for a certain payment allotment for that property, that payment just got up by how much when the rate goes up, where now they either need more cash in the deal, they need the price to recede, or they just can't afford it and they back away. So
I would say,
what are the ratios?
I'm going to throw a number out there. I have no idea. I can tell you what mortgage applications are down like 50%, but a big part of that is because the refi business is completely gone. So that's attributing to a huge portion of that. I would say the people that were on the fringe that now that 3% to 6% pulled them out, maybe 5-10%. I don't think it's that big a number, because you can always come down a little bit in price too.
Right. Well, I think that's where we're going in this, is that first the inventory starts to pick back up. And then all of a sudden, Johnny and Steve, neighbors on the same block, are transferring out of the neighborhood and need to sell. And they thought they were going to get an extra 50 or 100,000. Now they can't even get their original ask, and nobody's knocking on the door. And now it starts to become a race to the bottom because they got to get out. And if they have a corporate reimbursement plan, well, they don't care because the company's going to reimburse them and eat it anyway, right? So now people, excuse my language, people start dropping their pants because they want to get out. And so that's where the investor or the people you got sitting on the sidelines, as Nick alluded to, can come back in. So again, the whole point of this is we don't know exactly where that tipping scale is, but I think collectively the three of us have recognized things have started to move, maybe not tip, but move away from the red hot market into maybe a little more saner, a little bit more normality. And then eventually the question is, how much higher do interest rates go? And I just think people got so comfortable and, let's say the word fat, that it was so good for this window of time we've had, COVID or otherwise, where the stock market was going crazy, the real estate market was going crazy, people were taking advantage of that. Well, I hope people put their quarters away, because that trend is going to shift. And again, it's a line I've used before. All things end badly, otherwise they wouldn't end. And so when people say, oh, it's demand-based and it's going to keep going and I don't see it slowing down, I'm like, but there's always a catalyst. You guys have been in the business long enough to see some of these catalysts that create that pivot.
You know what? You know what's amazing, Bruce, and that Jeff and I can speak from our direct experience over the last couple of months. What was different this time is it seems like it happened overnight. Somebody flipped a switch. And it went from crazy hot, list your house, you're going to get 10 offers day one, you pick the one you want, to, okay, now it's more normal. It might take 30, 60 days. But it happened pretty much overnight here.
Yeah. It's fast.
Almost everywhere. Once people got locked down, could figure out they could work somewhere else, that the job accommodated them, that the Zoom technology and all this video conferencing, and your boss is like, well, you know what, Jeff, you can work from home today. Nick, you don't have to come in today. You just remote in. We'll see you. We'll have a meeting here, get your work done. And guess what? Productivity went up. That, I think, was the astonishing part, is most workforce environments were like, our productivity is getting better. These people are working at home because they're happier. They don't waste time commuting. They don't have to get up and shower. They don't have to see anybody, right? And so it created where, well, I don't need to live in the city anymore. I could live in the suburbs. So people left New York and they went into the Jersey suburbs. They went into Westchester. They went into Long Island. They came to Florida. I don't need to be in the cold winter anymore, right? I go to Arizona. I can go to Florida. So yeah, it was a vacuum for sure. It became this big whoosh. And unfortunately, again, I'm not a doomsday sayer, but I'm a contrarian and a pragmatic. It's got to end some point, and I caution people that they think it's easy. Again, I go back to the 03, 07 window when everybody and their brother was getting into real estate to flip houses because lending was so easy. You were flipping deals. People were lining up to buy 6 condos at Miami Beach, putting $1,000 down and walking away making hundreds, selling them to the people at the back of the line, no less, and making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they thought it was easy. Like Bitcoin, it's easy money, you're missing out. Well, then it hits the fan and it's not so easy. So somebody is always left holding the bag. And my job here at Ask the Planman is to educate people so they don't become the ones holding the bag, is to be wiser, be smarter. Go ahead.
I had the conversation with one of my coworkers about 2 months ago when things were flaming hot. And he was saying, something will change. It always does. And it did.
Right. Again, all things end badly. Right?
I don't think we're going to see, a real estate doomsday like we did in 07, 08, because the lending was so tightened up in the last, 15 years. You're not seeing, no offense, but you're not seeing the landscaper or whatever owning 4 houses. Did he put nothing down, stated income loan, and walked away from it? That inventory doesn't exist. And I think there's a lot of data that supports there's much, much more equity in people's homes right now than there was in 07, 08. So that I don't think we're up for some big gigantic crash like we had in those years.
No, I don't either. And because of the equity, I think the number, because I got the statistics about a week ago, and I think the average equity in a home in the US right now is like 57%.
It's crazy. That did not exist. But then I go back to when we're talking about competing, and this is maybe off topic for a second, but it's still real estate related. We're talking about people, offers, like Nick and I were saying, you put your house on the market, you're going to get 100 showings, you're going to get 20 offers. The people that were driven away from that market were the people that couldn't afford to waive appraisal, so those guys were gone. Where now they have a chance. This is it. I mean, if they want to buy, they're either waiting for a better interest rate or waiting for prices to go down again. But their buyability right now is perfect. They they've got almost normal market. They don't have to overpay. The sellers, I think, are more realistic. They're not expecting appraisal waivers. They're not expecting no repairs to be requested. They're not expecting 60 to 90 days free post-possession, where that was all normal a few months ago. If you wanted a deal, you did all that stuff.
You just took what you were being given.
Right. But
Nick's.
No, I was just going to say that now that buyer is more normal. He can step right in where he was blown out 3 months ago. This is his time, I think.
So Nick said earlier that people are getting priced out of the market is predominantly on the lower side, the first-time home buyer, maybe somebody who's not making a robust living yet and just getting that first home, starter home, what have you. And so what we've seen as a byproduct of this down here in South Florida, this region, and I'm sure like the Scottsdale region, is home values have gone up literally double. Where a $300,000 house is now $600,000 or $700,000. A $700,000 house is $1.5 million to $2 million. Okay. Followed with that is the rents have gone up in coordination because some people are saying, oh, I don't need my 5-bedroom house anymore. I'm going to downsize. I'll go rent and I'll wait and ride out the market for a while. So the rental market here, as well as your area and other pockets of the country, have gone up 40 to 50%. And so now you're not just seeing that people can't afford to buy the houses, you have people who can't afford to rent.
Right.
And those are the school teachers. Those are the people, the kids that are working at the restaurants and the schools around here. And we're a vacation centric area, but we have a lot of snowbirds and a lot of seasonality as you do. But how many restaurants do you go to and hotels do you go to with signs apologizing? Sorry for blank, blank, we are understaffed. So there's a labor problem, and that is at an epicenter of some of this, is if they can't get affordable housing, they can't get an affordable place to rent, they can't step in and buy. Nick's rates now doubled on them. If the prices don't come down, what's going to give to get these people back into things? And to me, it's 2007 where the California housing crisis, if you remember, nobody could afford to live anywhere near Silicon Valley. And so they were building homes, I don't remember what area it was, like east, not west, east, 2 hours east, so that the Bakersfield, people who drive the buses, the nurses from the school, your school teachers, your nannies, your housekeepers, they had to have an affordable place to live, and now they're 2 hours away from where they have to go every day, and that became its own problem. So unfortunately, our society we are damned to repeat our mistakes, and I feel like there's the roost, the hen hasn't come home to roost yet, is that the right phrase? I think there's still more coming to Jesus that's going to happen here, right?
Do you even think, though, that the younger kids, they're the ones that are working in the restaurants and the lower paying jobs, I don't even know that those kids have a desire to own homes these days. They want the mobility. They don't care about that American dream, like, oh, I have to settle down, I have to own a home. They don't own a car because they take Uber. I don't know.
I agree with you on some point. I've got 3 kids that are, I guess, deemed to be millennials from 27, 29, and 31, and they each have different views. And one lives in New York City, and one lives in Myrtle Beach, and the youngest is actual homeowner. He bought a condo. He works at a hotel in South Florida, and so he put some roots down, and he invested his money in real estate 1.5 years ago, and he's done nicely with it. And I got one in New York City, that's never going to be able to afford to purchase something in New York City. And then I got one in Myrtle Beach. And so again, vacation, type properties, but it does have more affordable housing for him down there. But your point is valid, and not to go down another rabbit hole because we're going to start running out of time here. But there's been that boom in the RV market that has been a byproduct of this as well, which we could have you guys back on and we could get into that. But your point is very valid, Nick, in that regard, is that the younger people, what's it called? The not migration now. The mass resignation, right? We're going through a national resignation. People don't want to work. They don't want to be, as you just said, that American dream of owning a home and having a picket fence. Like, I'm going to go to Colorado. I don't need a prescription card. I can buy whatever I want there, right? It's like, it's just a different generation now of how they go about it. So that bodes for other problems, more episodes of the Plan Man, because it's going to have impact on Social Security. It's going to impact as the generation dies out and the next generation comes in, and how society is going to keep feeding those government programs. Because if there's no workforce feeding into it, because everybody's living off the land, well, government's got to get its money to keep paying Medicare and Medicaid and all that other stuff. So again, that's a rabbit hole. So any closing thoughts? I'm gonna start to wrap up the show, but anything else you guys had in mind to share with the crowd? So
I don't think so. I think the people that are waiting, saying, "Oh, I'm waiting for rates to come down," or "I'm waiting," no, it's not worth waiting. I mean, they don't remember the 80s when rates were 18%. These rates are good. And I also think, regardless what people think, inflation drives rates. As soon as they get a handle on the inflation, they'll start to trickle back down. But 5%, 5.5% is not a bad rate. Don't be waiting.
I said to somebody the other day, a 30-year-old doesn't remember 2001, which was 20 years ago, when rates were 7-8%, and I was refinancing, coming down to 5, getting down to 4, taking a 5-year arm, and hoping rates didn't spike back up with me because we were going to eventually sell. So you played the rate game, and then all of a sudden we've had this lengthy period of time of sub 5, sub 4, into the 3s. We've become spoiled. You and I, 3 of us, have been around the block long enough to know it's as abnormal on the low side as it was in the 70s and 80s on the high side.
Right.
But again, it's back to that reverting to the mean, and 7-8% mortgages can very easily come back into play and become the new norm. And that's what it was 20 years ago. So the question is, my home value 20 years ago was $200,000 and today it's $800,000. And so the question is, can people carry those higher price valuations at the higher rates? Because my $250,000 house then at 7% only went up to $600,000 and $700,000 because rates kept going down, which drove up purchasing power. So it's going to have to trickle down. But well, thank you, gentlemen. I'm going to bring us to a wrap. Jeff, did you have any closing thoughts? I'm sorry, we didn't give you a chance to.
No, not much. I would just say, though, like if it's, I back up to the market itself. I think your market in Florida and our market in Arizona is a little more foofy and wonderful than it is in most of the country. Like I wouldn't want property in maybe Detroit or whatever, parts of Pennsylvania, just different. There, I think the sun is shining. There's people still want to move here. They do want to get out of the cold and come here. So we're a little insulated.
Well, but the line is we live where you vacation.
True.
So that demand is there. You want to own a house in the Caribbean, people will rent your house every day, right? It's in the Caribbean. So we live where you vacation, then that demand is going to be there. Go ahead. The point I was getting at was, like earlier in the show, I said I probably wouldn't buy a flip right now. If I were ready to do another primary and flip my own primary, I would have no problem doing that right now. Waiting the 2 or 3 years, own it. You're not going to get hurt, right? Probably if you get stuck with it, you live in it. It's not a big deal. But I would still be cautious, and I would do it if you could afford, again, a custom home subdivision where you can add on 1,000 square feet and make money that way, as opposed to just buying, a cookie cutter home that you're just going to throw paint and cabinets and hope to make money. I think that's real difficult right now. But if you're smart with additions and things like that, you can do okay. So I'll summarize some of what you're sharing with us is do your homework, understand your market, understand what you're buying. Jeff's experience and successes come from not buying the cookie cutter box cut house, but finding more unique properties that are one of a kinds that he could renovate, he could tailor. He just said to you, add on space. If you could add a 3rd or 5th or 7th bedroom or a mother-daughter suite, or a lot of the houses I've seen you had over the years have the private bungalow in the back, right? You got the pool, you fence in the yard, and you give it some nice slipstick and renovate it. And all of a sudden you're adding $400,000 or $500,000 of value because somebody else is going to come in there and they're going to be willing to pay for it because you did all the dirty work.
Correct.
So for those looking to get into the renovating, flipping market, There is a distinction between what you live in and renovate versus just buying homes to flip versus things that you're going to keep from an Airbnb, VRBO type of market. So there's three distinct ways to go about it. There is no one right answer for everybody. So do your homework, speak to consultants, speak to people like Nick on the lending side, understanding your borrowing costs, your closing costs. Again, there's a lot of fees involved in these things. You got to pay exit commissions when you get out. There's closing costs. So again, do your homework. Unless you're fortunate enough to be a cash buyer, you're going to need people like Nick and Jeff in there to step in. So please do your homework. We're going to put everybody's contact info in the show notes below. So please like, share, and subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube channel. We'd love to hear from you in the audience. So please give us a call at 1-844-PLANMAN. You can visit our website, www.asktheplanman.com, or you can email me personally at bruce@asktheplanman.com. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Nick. The Esposito boys did it right. Good for you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Bruce.
Want to thank the audience for joining us today. Remember, if you need some advice, always get it right. Come on, Ask the Planman. We look forward to seeing you next time.